This is a portrait I drew, brothers and sisters, of Norman Reedus, who plays Daryl Dixon. I had the opportunity to present him with a signed copy of this at the Chicago Comic Con when I met him last month. Season 1, Episode 3, Tell It to the Frogs. Well, hello, my brothers and sisters of the Nerd Nation, or I guess we can start calling it the Dead Nation for purposes of the Walking Dead reviews. I, as always, am Jim, here to bring you another review on the gripping and grisly tale of the Walking Dead. Really, our last episode wrapped up with our main character, Rick Grimes, our hero, so to speak, having narrowly escaped with Atlanta with the other survivors, and they're racing off in this box truck that they took. And Glenn has raced off ahead of him in the sports car that he has. It's a Challenger, I believe. And that's how things end off. Now, we know from seeing the show that Rick's wife and son are at this camp, and so is his best bosom buddy who's banging his wife, Shane. So I wonder how that's all going to play out. And I kind of when I saw this, I was wondering, like, okay, first of all, I didn't think he was going to meet up with them so quickly, and second of all, and find his family so quickly, and second of all, when he did, how was his wife going to explain, like, I've been banging your best buddy over here, How much time passed? And I mean, what did she really think happened to him to wind up sneaking off into the forest during the zombie apocalypse instead of watching her son, like she should be, because that's what she should be concentrating on and thinking about. But instead, she's thinking about getting deep dicked by Shane Walsh in the forest. So, which we saw obviously at the beginning of the second episode, and so this is something that plays much different from the comic book. But what I can also tell you is that this was one of my favorite episodes. In general, I just really loved the first season. Just truly loved it. Even though it was short, they were moving, they were going. There's many different great locations. We were introduced to all these vibrant characters. So this episode, the beginning of it, not only do we get introduced to the other characters back at the camp, Dale and and Amy, of course, Andrea's younger sister, and we see Sophia and her parents, Carol and Ed Peltier, and there's a few others as well. But really, one of the most touching, heartfelt moments that you're going to see in The Walking Dead, and certainly in the first season, is them approaching in the truck and pulling up, and Rick's like, and everybody else, of course, is getting out, and they're going back to see their friends and family and loved ones at the camp that they've been living at, and Rick's just kind of like, he's just devastated. He's like happy he just barely, narrowly escaped the city and what happened. But he's thinking in his mind, like, that's where I thought this refugee camp was, and obviously the city's been overrun. So in his mind, I'm sure he's thinking, like, how am I ever going to find my wife and child? Are they dead? And again, I mean, coming from a father and husband myself, as I am, I can only imagine and put myself in his shoes and imagine how he'd feel. So in this great touching moment, he's told to come on out and meet the group. And as he gets out and goes to start walking towards them, I mean, just such great camera work and such great acting. And he just kind of stops dead in his tracks as he goes, and he sees, one by one, he sees his best friend Shane. He sees his wife standing by his son. Carl has his back to him at the time, and he kind of turns and starts playing like the sort of cheesy but yet really great music, you know what I mean, that just fits the whole mood and style. And his son kind of turns, and I mean, in this heartfelt moment, this Carl was so young, Chandler Riggs, though, such a great kid. He was so young in this, though, and he just turns, and it makes me think about, like, when my kids haven't seen me for a few hours, because they've been in school all day, and they run up to me and, Dad, and he's just like, Dad! And I mean, just runs to him, and I mean, what a great touching moment. I can't dwell on this moment enough, because it's one of the best that you'll see in television or in movies and anything. Just really, really touching and heartfelt. And as I said, I didn't think that he'd meet up with his family that soon. I thought that was going to be the driving force for him in the first season, was to be reunited with his family. And Shane kind of has this surprised look on his face too. We don't know exactly what has happened or transpired at this time, how long things have happened, why they left him there. I mean, all that's kind of left in the dark. So at any rate, Shane basically tells him, hey, listen, I was able to get your family out of there. And Rick's like, listen, I'm so grateful for you doing that. You're my best buddy. At the time, he doesn't know that he's been sticking his wife. but he's just happy to be back. So it's really kind of a nice, happy reunion over there. Dale, the older gentleman that we saw that has the RV and that was on the radio at the end of the first episode, trying to receive Rick's transmission when he was coming into Atlanta and warn him not to go. Dale basically goes, hey, what happened with Merle? And they tell him what happened, how he left him handcuffed to this roof by accident, and he says that's going to be a problem when Daryl gets back. And we haven't been introduced to Daryl yet, but we find out that is Merle's brother. So later on that night, there's a nice exchange, between kind of everybody, and Rick's going, I thought I was dead and this and that. And he's telling about what happened. I woke up in the hospital, and he's sitting there with his wife and his son. And you see that there is, they introduce you to the character of Ed Peltier, who's a real asshole. And you see that his wife and his daughter, Carol and Sophia, kind of fear him. But they wind up having another fire going, and one of the rules they have in the camp is to keep their fires low, even when it's cold at night, so no one can see them from the distance, whether it be the walkers or whether it be other people that are trying to harm them. The world has gone to shit, and Shane has to kind of go over and lay down the law with them and tell them, hey, you got to keep that shit down. And then there's also this exchange where Shane kind of goes and looks, and it's real profound because obviously he stepped in and thinks he's like the surrogate father, and husband here, and obviously must have thought that Rick was dead because he kind of does this little look over, this longing look, almost a look of hatred, towards the tent, and he sees the shadow of Rick in there with with his wife. Rick and his wife wind up, getting busy, and clearly Lori is spreading her legs for anybody that that is her husband or that knows her husband, and they get some things going. The next day, we wind up seeing, that there's, again, this is just kind of a character building episode where they're introducing us to the whole camp. But the main point of the next day is we're introduced to, after the kids happen upon a walker, Carl and Sophia happen upon a walker that's off close to the camp that's actually munching on a deer, has killed a deer and is eating it. So they go over and somebody chops his head off with a hatchet or with an axe or what have you. And all of a sudden we're introduced to one of the mainstays and my wife's favorite character, and most women in general, Daryl Dixon, played by Norman Reedus. Again, this is another guy who's a real cool stand-up guy. I did a portrait of him as well as John Bernthal and had the opportunity to meet them, take some pictures with them and everything like that last month at the Chicago Comic-Con. And just a real cool, down-to-earth guy. Like I said, was real nice and kind to me, my wife, and one of my kids who had come with. So can't say enough good things about him. But he's Merle's backwards hillbilly redneck brother, right? And except for he's got a little bit more in the morals department. But we wind up seeing him, and it's really kind of a cool scene that he comes in, because he kind of comes in and he had been hunting the deer, and he's all pissed off that the zombie got a hold of it, and the zombie's head you kind of see all of a sudden still moving, right, even though it's been cut off, and we don't know yet what's going on with them. But Daryl goes and he has this trademark crossbow. He fires it a bolt into its head, and then steps on its head, pulls out, and he says, "What the hell's wrong with y'all? It's got to be the brain, like it's amateur hour over here. You can't just cut their heads off. You got to hit them in the brain." So that's the first time we're introduced to that. Daryl winds up getting pretty upset because when he finds out that Merle was left, at first he's cool with it because he thinks that maybe Merle just got killed or he's dead. Well, everybody explains to him that basically he was handcuffed to a roof, he got out of control, this and that, and that's where they just left him there in Atlanta. So Daryl kind of flips out and comes after Rick, and Shane goes and grabs his ass. And say whatever you want about Shane, but Shane is a loyal person on one hand. On the other hand, you see what he did with his wife and everything, but Shane's also like a fucking tank, man. I mean, he grabs Daryl and puts him in a headlock, and it's kind of funny because Daryl's like, "Hey, chokeholds are illegal," because he starts choking him. And I always thought it was because, and not because of wrestling or anything like that, but because, police, I don't think, are allowed to do a chokehold on somebody unless they need to exhibit or use deadly force, because I think they're illegal to actually hurt somebody. And then Shane says, yeah, file a complaint, because obviously he's a cop. They wind up calming down Daryl, and Rick has pretty much decided that he's going back for Merle anyway. Even though Merle is a piece of garbage and a piece of trash, he cannot, with his conscience, you see the good guy come out in Rick, and this is where you see that he's kind of the cowboy, he's the savior, he's the superhero. He can't leave another man to die chained up and exposed on a roof like that, whether it's from exposure or whether it's from, zombies eating him or whatever. He just can't do that to somebody. So you kind of come to the conclusion he's already going to go back, and Lori's not happy about that, but so that that calms Daryl down a little bit. He's not excited about it, but they do. They decide that they're going to go back, and they're going to take a small team of people back in. T-Dog, the guy who wound up dropping the handcuff keys, who Merle beat the shit out of, he decides he's going to go back because he's just like, you know what? And he even tells Daryl, he goes, you wouldn't understand, man. But basically he's telling him, he's like, I can't leave a man to die either. I don't care if he's a piece of garbage. I feel responsible because I dropped those keys. So T-Dog, Daryl, Rick, and then of course Glenn. And Glenn doesn't really want to go, but Glenn's the guy he's real quick. He used to be a pizza delivery guy, we find out, and I don't know if it's in this episode or the next one, but we find out that's kind of how he's really good at like sneaking in and out of the city, because he's just a real quick kind of Weasley type of guy. So the four of them go and head off towards the city. Again, much to and Shane's not happy about it either. There's an exchange between him and Rick where he's basically just like, listen, man, you can't go back. And Rick's like, listen, we're going to get Merle, but also I dropped a bag of guns in the street. He explains to his wife that he owes his life to Morgan and his son Dwayne, and if you remember, that was the guy from the first episode that saved him. And he basically he plays it, he spins it to her like, hey, listen, not only can I not leave a man to die, whether he's a piece of shit or not, I got to go back and get that bag of guns and the CB that I have, our old CB, from their town or whatever. And Shane explains some nonsense about how they don't work with other ones, they're not compatible, so it isn't like he can communicate with them anyway, but getting this CB back that's in the bag with the guns. So he's also like pitching it to Shane, and he's like, listen, there's a bag of guns, man. I got rifles, I got shotguns, I got a ton of handguns, 700-800 rounds of ammo. We can arm the camp, because the only thing that the camp has right now is there's a shotgun that Shane has, like a police shotgun, and then Dale has like a hunting rifle. And that's all they have to protect these, 20, 30 survivors in this camp. And it's completely exposed, obviously, too. Now, they've said that, being up on the mountain like they are by this quarry, they haven't really had any stray walker here or there, but nothing of significance. Shane does not want him to go, but Rick goes anyway. And the four of them go and head off, Shane, Daryl, T-Dog, and Glenn. And they go off and head their merry way. We wind up going and seeing a little bit, too, about this, the exchange of what happens and what had actually happened, because Shane goes and later on is down by the quarry, and there's a pond down there, a lake or whatever, and he's down there teaching Lori and Rick's son, Carl, how to catch frogs, and they're playing around having a good time. Now, Lori is pissed at him. She had nothing but scowls on her face since Rick, materialized and came back to life. Well, we shortly find out why thereafter, because there's an exchange where she basically tells Carl, get out of here, go back to the camp. And she tells Shane, and then Shane's like, Lori, we better talk and this and that. We haven't had a chance to. And she's like, don't you dare. And he's trying to explain to her, and she's like, you told me my husband was dead, And he's like, he's my best friend. Don't you think I'm happy that he's alive? And she doesn't even allow him to explain, which I never really understood, because I don't care if it was for weeks or months, but if you had me, you were my best friend, or the best friend of my spouse, and you led me to believe that my spouse was dead for weeks or months or what have you, I would at the very least, if my spouse appeared from the dead all of a sudden one day and walked into camp, I would at least want an explanation as to what happened or why. I wouldn't just assume the worst. But she does, and she kind of walks away. She tells him, you're not part of our lives anymore. Stay away from us. Now, Shane, for these weeks or months, has kind of fallen into this pattern of like a father figure to Carl. He's become friends with him. He's certainly become like a surrogate father to him, in what he thought looks like in his eyes it truly was, in the thought of the absence of Rick. He thought he was dead. So I guess we find out as the series goes on, but at this point, you're just kind of wondering, like, what was it that that could have led him to this. So, but there is obviously a connection, and that he feels like a father figure and somebody that's a protector of Lori. And then, of course, he's getting regular sex during the apocalypse. So I guess that can't be all bad for Shane. So as he's going to walk away from the quarry, we see some of the other women that kind of get together, Amy, her sister Andrea, Jackie, and they're all talking amongst themselves, Carol, and they're doing laundry. It's a community, so basically the women, even though they don't have washing machines and stuff, they're helping out by washing the clothes. It's outside of Atlanta, it's probably hot, everybody gets sweaty, dirty, so they're washing clothes down by the river. Well, Carol's scumbag husband's sitting there smoking a cigarette, and he's just tub of shit sitting off to the side, and they're all kind of laughing, talking amongst themselves, and they're talking about things that they missed during the apocalypse, a coffee maker, washing machine, this and that. And then Andrea goes, and she goes, I miss my vibrator. And I always just thought it was a real comical thing, because again, this is a real edgy show at this point. Three episodes into it, man, they've already covered things with racism, they've been chopping off heads, they've been throwing all kinds of swears out there, and this is AMC, which, I thought was, they show movies, older movies. So at any rate, Ed goes and he comes over and says, "Yeah, what you women laughing about? This ain't no comedy club." And he comes over and starts acting like an asshole. And then he goes and tells his wife Carol, "Yeah, come on, you better get your ass back over here." And we can see that that he is very very demanding of her, and that there's probably some verbal and physical abuse going on there. The other women know about it too, and even Jackie, she's a black woman. She winds up saying, she says, "Oh yeah, why does she have to go with you, Ed? So she can wake up to her, she can come back to us tomorrow with fresh bruises on her." And Ed's like, "What are you talking about? You don't know nothing, you silly bitch." And he starts talking down to the other women. Andrea stands up and says she doesn't need to go with you. Ed goes and pushes at Andrea, and he nails his wife. He smacks Carol and says, "Come on, you're going to get with me." Well, he definitely fucked with the wrong person at the wrong time, because Shane, who's got all this pent up frustration and now all this pent up sexual frustration because he's not going to be popping Lori anymore. And Shane, this John Bernthal, I mean, I'm taller than him, but he's a pretty built guy, So either way, though, he kind of just comes, and I mean like a fucking bulldozer, man. He just winds up coming right through, because remember, he just had the fight with Lori. He's pissed off. He can't be by Carol anymore. He sees Ed, and I mean, he grabs him, and he just fucking beats the shit out of him. And I'm a person that I don't generally condone violence unless it's necessary. And for someone like this that was bigger, and apparently he hits his wife, and he hits his daughter, who looks like she's only about 10, 12 years old, I don't condone that shit at all. I don't care how people weigh in on it. Ultimately, you can go either way on it and have your opinion. That's fine. You're entitled to it. But that shit doesn't fly with me. So you touch my wife or my kids, and I'm going to bury you. And it's as simple as that. And that's how Shane looks at it. I mean, he beats him to a pulp, to within an inch of his life, and then beats him some more. Kicks him a few times. He's going away. It's just a great feeling, because this guy's a real scumbag, unlikable character, The episode, like I said, was just really good, packed with stuff, packed with a bunch of action, a bunch of character development. The show winds up ending. That particular episode ends with goes back to the four characters sneaking into Atlanta, trying to be quiet, obviously getting around, and there's a little bit of a debate whether we're going to get the guns first or Merle, and then Daryl's like, "This ain't even a debate," And obviously they're not all armed. I mean, Daryl's got his crossbow, and Rick's got his his big ass 357 Magnum or whatever that thing is that he carries, his big hammer. But that's about it. I mean, other than some like a crowbar or a baseball bat. So, but they decide that Glenn is the one that knows the city real well, and he says that it's closer to go get Merle. So they wind up going back to that building. They encounter a zombie or two inside the building, but for the most part, the herd that was there, that had been attracted by all the sound, the gunshots, has wandered off now, being the next day. So they wind up getting to the top. They wind up having to, cut the chain or whatever. They borrowed some bolt cutters from Dale earlier, and they cut the chain. They get out there, and Merle is not on the top of the building. Now, there was a brief thing at the beginning of the episode where it showed Merle, and he was chained to the roof, and it was the next day, and he was crying out, and he was kind of like asking God for help, and then he was like, "Screw you, I'll get out of this myself," and it was a real cool exchange, because Michael Rooker is just a great actor. And we see that during that exchange, all the way back at the beginning of the episode, that he was reaching and looking for and trying to get to this. He was trying to get to this bag of tools that had been spilled out by T-Dog as he was running when the key dropped, and one of them was a hacksaw. So you can only assume that he was trying to get to that hacksaw to cut through the cuffs, right? Well, we wind up seeing in a really cool, it kind of pans out, and we see the pipe that Merle was attached to. Merle's no longer there. The handcuffs are hanging, right? And they're still intact, and you're like, what the fuck? We wind up going and seeing the hacksaw bloody on the ground, and then it goes and it pans out a little bit more, and we see Merle's hand just sitting there. And I mean, it's just real grisly looking. You're thinking, my God, how did this guy go and saw through his own goddamn hand? I mean, his entire wrist bone, and sever it to get away. And it ends with Norman Reedus, Daryl, basically going, "No! No!" And he's assuming that Merle's probably been killed or eaten or dragged off or whatever. He doesn't know, but basically, I mean, he's upset. It's his brother. So really, really a cool, powerful episode. And I guess the question of this episode is, if faced with something like he was, now he doesn't know if the walkers are going to be able to get through that door or not, because they were all pushing up against it and trying to pop out there earlier at the beginning of that episode. So he's fearing for his life, obviously, and he figures nobody's coming back for him, right? But if faced with a situation like that, would you saw through your own arm, wrist, leg? I mean, would you? Or would you try to hold out as long as you could? Would you literally try to squeeze yourself out of the cuffs and maybe dislocate a finger or pull some of the skin off of your hand to squeeze through the cuffs? Or would you literally sit there this had to take him minutes. And can you imagine the pain that he had to be going through to sit and saw through an entire wrist? So, would you do it or would you not if faced with that type of decision? That's the question of the day, brothers and sisters. So, hope you enjoyed the kind of review / recap. We're going to be doing them here all the way leading up to the season 4 premiere. Leave your comments down below, and the answer to my question, of course, would you saw through a one of your appendages to escape what you think may be certain death or not? Would you just kind of give in and say, "Fuck this, man, I'll just die," or wait for somebody to save me? Of course, feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button if you think that I deserve it for my random nonsense, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We will look forward to catching you in the next one, Nation.
As always, thanks for watching, brothers and sisters, and remember, join the Nerd Nation. It's the right thing to do. Trust me. Tell them Jim sent you.